Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military Summary channel and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 17th of November of 2024. Today we have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first we're going to talk about the Russian massive missile strike. More precisely, we're going to talk about the consequences of Russian attack. And during the day we got the significant number of reports that the Russians were using all types of weapons they have. They were using drones, they were using ballistic missiles, hypersonic missiles, the Russians were using cruise missiles, and somewhere at noontime or a little bit later we got the map of possible roads of attack. For example, in this map we can see the significant number of roads, directions, and many other different things, and we see that indeed that was one of the biggest attack probably for the previous 4 or 3 months. And now let's discuss about the details and about the consequences and the results. First, let's talk about the result of work of Ukraine air defense. According to official statement of the Ukrainian forces, they managed to bring down up to 144 air targets, including 102 missiles and 42 drones. If we talk about details about the work of this of Ukraine air defense system, the most important that according to them, they managed to bring down 1 Zircon hypersonic missile and 7 Kinzhal hypersonic missiles. Obviously, the results are significant. But if you would like to hear my opinion, I believe that I analyzed the entire situation during the day I was analyzing, and I came to conclusion that most likely the Ukrainians for some reason decided to increase the numbers. The Ukrainians increased the numbers of missiles and drones that the Russians launched first of all, and the Ukrainians increased the number of drones and missiles they managed to bring down. Obviously, that was made for some propaganda purposes, to show the Ukrainians the work of air defense, to show the Ukrainians that the Russians launched the biggest attack ever since the beginning probably of the special military operation, that the Russians are attacking Ukraine during the almost before the winter came, and we see the significant number of missiles. The Russians are planning to destroy energy facilities. So this is something like a propaganda, at least this might be a propaganda part to show that the Russians are not going to start any negotiation process. The Ukrainians also by these attacks and by this picture try to maybe force the Western countries to give them more weapon, more money, and maybe more air defense systems and many other things. So summarizing everything, the Ukrainians by these statistics, by these data, first of all tries to prolong the war on Ukrainian terms until Ukraine can get favorable positions in possible negotiation process. I'm not saying that the numbers that were provided by the Ukrainians are not correct, but it's my opinion, it's my feeling that the numbers are too big. But I'm not sure for 100%. Another important thing that Ukrainians were trying to use the situation as much as possible, because today we also got a lot of videos from the western part of Ukraine. For example, in this video we can see the cruise missile that was flying above the Ukrainian western part of Ukraine, and in the second part of the same video, a little bit from another angle, we can see the same missile, and a few seconds later we can see also the Ukrainian F-16. And later Zelensky confirmed this information that they used F-16s to bring down to bring down and to destroy Russian missiles. Zelensky reported that probably they were using up to 3 F-16s and they managed to destroy up to 10 missiles. So also very interesting, and also another part of propaganda. I'm not saying that the Ukrainians that Ukraine didn't use F-16s. Most likely they were using them, but the main idea is to show that Ukraine has these F-16s and that they're very successful, they're very effective, and that as a result of this attack none of the F-16 system was destroyed or damaged by the Russians or something like this. Furthermore, we continue receiving lots of updates, and once again the main target and the main purpose of the Russian attack during the previous 24 hours, according to geolocations and according to videos we received, was to destroy the energy facilities and energy infrastructure of Ukraine. For example, in this video we can see 3 caliber or cruise missiles missile strikes on Ukrainian energy substation in the city of Rovno. This is a very important substation because this substation is a part of Rovno nuclear power plant energy system, and of course the attack on this energy substation could lead to unpredictable consequences. Of course nothing happened, and there was some problems with energy, with electricity, with supply of this city and towns and villages around. But another important thing that I would like to point to your attention, despite the fact of the numbers that Ukrainians provided, despite the fact of some Russian attitude to the situation, the most important that the blackout hasn't happened. This is the most important because according to all these attacks, we also had the video of picture of consequences of Russian attack on Kremenchuk power plant. As you can see, as a result of damage, as a result of attack, the dam was damaged at least, and most likely the Ukrainians are no longer able to use this power plant along the Dnipro River. All these attacks and the situation, we see the Russians were attacking the energy facilities. Once again, the most important thing that based on these attacks, we can make a conclusion that indeed the Russians were trying to destroy the energy system of Ukraine. Maybe the Russians wanted to make a blackout for Ukraine, but we see that the blackout hasn't happened. Another important thing is the answer to the question whether the Russians are planning to attack the energy facilities this upcoming night between the 17th and the 18th of November. If the Russians are going to do this, then the Russians are very serious and they will not stop until they will turn the Ukraine completely off. Or the Russians will not do this. In this case, maybe this attack was just a signal, another message to Zelensky to start negotiation process, of course, in Russian favor. Another important thing that I would like to point to your attention, that this attack with the missiles, with a significant number of missiles, according to Ukrainians, started right after the end of the negotiations or call between the president of Russian Federation and leader of Germany, Olaf Scholz. Nobody knows for sure what exactly they were talking about, but they were talking around 1 hour. And the most important is that as a result of those negotiations, they decided to keep connections between the two offices. And another important thing, I'll remind you that Zelensky himself yesterday and the day before yesterday was asking Olaf Scholz not to call Putin. Don't call Putin. And we have this post by different very reliable sources. Zelensky asked Scholz not to call Putin, and later we got details why was he asking this. About one of today's news, Chancellor Scholz told me that he was going to call Putin. Olaf's call, in my opinion, is a Pandora's box. Now there can be other conversations, other calls, just a lot of words. So we see that Zelensky was very afraid of that call that took place a day ago, and after the end of that call, we see massive missile strike all over the entire territory of Ukraine, including the Russians were trying to destroy the energy facilities. I believe that all these things are connected. But once again, important thing, whether another wave of attack is going to happen between the 17th and the 18th of November. Most likely it will happen. Now let's move to the situation on the ground. We continue receiving different updates, and first let's talk about the village of Makarovka. I'll remind you that just yesterday the Minister of Defense of Russian Federation has reported that as a result of clashes, the Russians managed to establish complete control over this settlement. And yesterday, by the end of the 16th of November, the territory was colored in Russian favor. This territory used to be in contested zone, then it was colored in Russian favor, and today both neutral mappers and pro-Ukrainian resources reported that Ukrainians, as a result of counter-attack, managed to restore control over the village completely. And now, based on two reliable mappers, we have adjusted map back into contested area. So very difficult and complicated situation. Now it's very difficult to understand who is telling the truth and who is lying. But anyway, sooner or later we're gonna find this out. Now let's talk about the Sukhyali River and about the situation in this direction. We have lots of geolocations that confirm additional Russian progress. Today, the Ukrainian sources published the video. The Ukrainians from the 37th Marine Brigade published the video of how they were FPV droning and attacking the Russian forces on the main road between the village of Uspenovka and the village of Bogayavlenka and Maximovka. One of the episodes was geolocated exactly in this point, and the Russians were moving along the road in the direction of the village of Uspenovka. Based on this video, we have adjusted the map in Russian favor. This territory used to be in contested area according to different mappers report, and today we have final geolocation that allow us to adjust the map in Russian favor. Furthermore, we see that the Russians managed to reach the outskirts of Uspenovka and its dense network of the fortifications several days ago, but yet we haven't received anything that can confirm that the Russians made several attempts to attack the stronghold itself, or the Russians managed to get some results in this direction, both from the southern part and from the northern part, which is very weird. But all these days we've been receiving for lots of updates from the villages like Sukhie Yali, Yantarne and Konstantinopolska. So most likely the Russians are planning to use their tactics in this direction as well. They're not planning and they're not going to attack the stronghold in front. Most likely the Russians will try to outflank the stronghold in Uspenovka from the southwest and from the west. So I believe that we need to expect the additional attempts from the Russian side to attack on the line between the villages by the name of Maximovka in the direction of Gigant and then in the direction of Yantarne, and the Russians most likely will try to attack in the direction of Konstantinopolska. If the Russians are able to take these villages under complete control, then there is no need to fight for Uspenovka itself, because from these positions the Russians will be able to create the same cauldron as if they were attacking the village of Uspenovka and this dense network of the fortifications themselves. Furthermore, we still haven't received anything about the situation in Dalny. This configuration of map we saw already several days ago, and since that moment nothing has been changed. Nothing has changed, but most likely there are very heavy clashes right now, and most likely the Ukrainians are able to hold the lines by sending more and more forces of the 33rd Mechanized Brigade with the purpose to stabilize the situation. Anyway, this situation can't be endless. Sooner or later somebody will win. Furthermore, we continue receiving updates about the Russian attempts to clean up and to clear this stronghold. This is the key stronghold in this direction. If the Russians are able to take this big stronghold under complete control, and as you can see, according to different mappers, the Russians have already established around 50% control over this territory. If the Russians are able to take the stronghold completely under control, this will allow the Russians to resume their attempts to move further in the northwestern direction, and most likely this movement is going to be much faster in comparison with the progress in the villages of Novomikhailovka, Konstantinovka, Katerinovka, and Antonovka. Probably after the fall of these strongholds, 2, 3, 4, 5 days, and the territory between Katerinovka and Uspenovka itself would be captured and by the Russian forces. Now let's move further. As for the city of Kurakhova, during the previous 24 hours we haven't received anything special, just several FPV drone attacks on Ukrainian positions, communication equipment on the buildings in the central part. As for the northern part, we have additional changes on the ground, as you can see. During the previous video we have been already talking about this territory. The Russians managed, according to different mappers, the Russians managed to take under control the village of Nova Ilinka and to began assault operation in the direction of Berestki. This information was confirmed both by neutral mappers and pro-Ukrainian mappers. But right before we start making the video, the pro-Ukrainian sources published the video of how they were FPV droning and attacking the Russian forces in the vicinity of Berestki and Nova Ilinka itself. We have lots of episodes. Two of them were geolocated. One of the FPV drone attack took place here, another FPV drone attack took place here. Based on this video we have adjusted the map in Russian favor. So this is the situation by the end of the 16th of November, and this is the situation by the end of the 17th of November. The Russians are moving further, and also right before we start making the video we got report that the Russian army has begun to storm the settlement of Berestki on the northern shore of the Kurachovska Reservoir. Successes in the advance are noted. Assault units have already occupied up to a third of the settlement. So if this information is correct, if this information is true, then most likely by the end of the 18th of November, this territory that is located inside of this red line would be already captured by the Russians, which is going to be the beginning for the battle for the villages of Staroye Terny and Shevchenko, which is also a part of the Kurakhovo Cauldron plan. With the fall of one of these two villages, Shevchenko or Staroye Terny, the entire group of Ukrainian forces in the Kurakhovo direction would be caught in cauldron without any chances for successful evacuation. Now let's talk about the western part of Selidova. As you can see, we have a lot of flags. According to different mappers, the Russians continue moving further in the western direction, and as a result of clashes, the Russians managed to take under control two more strongholds to the west of Selidova. This is it. This is the how the map was by the end of the 16th of November. This is by the end of the 17th. Two more strongholds were captured, and the Russians are moving further. Most likely in the very near future, the Russians will begin outflanking operation with the purpose to attack the village of Slavyanka, and then the Russians will try to move further in the southwestern direction with the purpose to get as close as possible to the village by the name of Andreevka. So very difficult days are coming for the Ukrainians in this direction. They will be forced to make a decision whether to stand there and as long as possible, but to lose the significant number of forces, or to retreat. And then the question is where exactly the Ukrainians are able to slow down and to stop the Russians further in the western direction. Now let's talk about Mirnograd. Very interesting began happening on the line between the southern part of Mirnograd and northern part of Novogrodovka. There are very heavy clashes. The Ukrainians are bombing and attacking the Russian edge positions in the northern part of Novogrodovka. In this video, we can see the Russian trenches and the fortifications, and how the Ukrainians were attacking the Russian positions with short assault attacks, with artilleries, with the FPV drones, and so on. On the other side, we start receiving updates of how the Russians were bombing and attacking the Ukrainian positions in the southern part of Mirnograd. So as you can see, there is certain duel between the Russian forces, but this duel, first of all, reminds me at the beginning of the some big preparation before some big attack from the Russian side in the northern direction. In this video, we can see how the Russians, as a result of a tank duel, managed to destroy Ukrainian vehicle in the southern part of the settlement. And later, we got another video of how the Russian FPV drone will destroy Ukrainian vehicle almost in the same point. So very heavy duels exactly between these two cities. As for the Chasiv Yar, the Russians continue their offensive operation in the Zabalka district, and during the previous 24 hours, additional blocks were captured by the Russians. The dynamic in this area is getting very, very fast. As for the city of Chasiv Yar, during the previous 24 hours, we haven't received anything special. The last update we got is that the Russians managed to reach the citadel of Chasiv Yar, but as for now, we haven't received anything that confirm additional progress on the ground. Most likely, during the next 48 hours, we're going to receive something. As for the series direction, as we discussed, the Russians decided to change to completely refactor or to format the entire direction. Lots of officers, lots of commanders and generals of the armed forces of Russian Federation were arrested and dismissed according to fake information they provided to the general staff about the current things on the ground. We have discussed this already in the previous video. Now let's talk about the northern Kupiansk direction. Currently there are very heavy clashes in the northern part of Kupiansk, and as you know, and you might follow a lot of mappers, lots of military experts, and most of them have already adjusted the northern part of Kupiansk in Russian favor. We have done this the same, but you need to understand one important thing. Despite the fact that the northern part of Kupiansk was colored by many mappers already, we need to understand that there are still there is still recorded the presence of Ukrainian units. Russians managed to encircle them. Some buildings, for example, even when talking about these block, probably, let's say, 3 buildings or 4 buildings in this line under Russian control, 2 buildings a little bit to the southwest under Ukraine control, the buildings to the east again under the Russian control, the buildings to the south maybe under Ukraine control, the next building under the Russian control. So the situation is that there are very heavy clashes, very close combat, very difficult and complicated situation. Both sides, the Russians and the Ukrainians, are sending more and more forces in the direction of the northern Kupiansk with the purpose not to allow each other to improve their positions and to get the initiative in their hands. Very heavy clashes, and we can't tell for sure that this is 100 exact sure situation that the Russians have already won the battle for the northern Kupiansk. Maybe they will win the battle for the northern Kupiansk, but there are still very heavy clashes and both sides suffered losses. As for the Sudzha direction, the Russians stopped their third counter-offensive operation. Currently, it's very difficult to understand what exactly the Russians managed to achieve as the results of those attacks. Indeed, the Russians managed to capture several settlements in the southeastern part, in the northern parts of Sudzha, but most likely this is not the result that the Russians were counting on. Most likely they expected better results, and now I think that they stopped the counteroffensive with the purpose to regroup and to understand what are they going to do next. And that's it for today. Military Summary channel reminds we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes to my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.